Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I will identify the top running backs to target in Week 12 by utilizing the fantasy relevant numbers that correlate with the top running backs to build your DFS lineups with. Before I unpack the Week 12 running backs, I want to take a quick look back at Week 11. The top 5 projected running backs in Week 12 in Week 11 were as follows: Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, Josh Jacobs, and Alvin Kamara. Those were the top 5 projected. The actual top 5 scoring were as follows: Christian McCaffrey with 33.10 fantasy points, Mark Ingram 23.5 fantasy points, Alvin Kamara 22.2 fantasy points, Ezekiel Elliott with 20.3 fantasy points, and Gus Edwards with 20.2 fantasy points. The actual ownership for the top 5 breaks down as follows. Number 1 was the what everyone thought was the free spot for Atlanta, and the backup running back replacing Freeman, Brian Hill. He had a 25.89% ownership. Jacobs from Oakland was next with 25.06%. McCaffrey had 15.44%. Cook 14.38%, and Ezekiel Elliott with 9.48% ownership. Now, these top 5 running backs averaged 18 total touches. That's carries and receptions combined. They scored an average of 23.86 fantasy points between the 5 of them, and that breaks down to 1.33 fantasy points per touch. Now, for me, I tried to build my lineups by using 3 running backs as often as possible. I do this obviously by trying to fit a running back in the flex position, and ideally, I want to project these running backs to get me 70 or more touches. Now, if I utilize the 1.33 points per touch, that was among the top 5 in Week 11, that would have gave me the 93.1 fantasy points between 3 running backs if they were in the top 5 as far as touches. That's why I really want to get to that 70 or more mark. Running backs, if I'm using 3 of them, obviously make up 1/3 of my lineup, and if 1/3 of my lineup is 90 points or more, I feel like I'm in really good position, no matter what kind of contest I'm in. And last week, the scores were lower than normal. If you've seen my quarterback and recap video, the winning Millie Maker score was only 221, which is significantly lower than some of the other winning scores this year. A few weeks ago, I created this chart to help you follow along with me. I used to share a lot of numbers, a lot of good information, but it was kind of hard just looking at a Draftkings lineup page and me spewing out a lot of numbers to you. This gives you a way to kind of like follow along and see what I'm talking about. Use it how you may. Take a screenshot of it. Pause the video. I haven't figured out a way to make a link to where you can get it. But for anybody that's new, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I just want to make sure for anybody that's new, and start over here. Green is obviously the best. Yellow is middle of the road, and the red color is the worst. And that means in comparison to the top for that particular category. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, you go over here, salary $10,500. It's in red. That doesn't mean Christian McCaffrey is a bad running back. It just means in this particular category, that's the worst. I mean, because if you go down here to Frank Gore, 4,100. Now, obviously, I'm going to take McCaffrey over Gore, but that price in comparison is the worst and it's really high at 10.5. You can go right next to McCaffrey leading the way in touches per game, 25.8. That's why that's in green. And then you drop down here to Pollard, who's only getting 6. That's just in comparison for that particular category. To recap these categories, in case you are new to the channel, obviously you have the name, the team to play for, their salary. This is touches per game for the season. This is their fantasy points scored per game. This is how many their opponents give up per game, fantasy points. This is the rank um, in comparison to the rest of the NFL. This is their snap percentage for the last four. I was doing this for the season, but some running backs that have just like Kareem Hunt, who's 5,600, it says his snap percentage, if you do it for the season, is only like 5%, or because that's in comparison to all the snaps for the season. So I did it by snap percentage for the last four. That kind of gives you a real number. This is total red zone. This is total red zone targets and total red zone carries. And this last category is actual points per snap with all things relevant: touchdowns, receptions, carries, just how many their snaps being on the field. That doesn't mean every single snap they get, they do something, but just being on the field. That's what that breaks down to. And you have someone like McCaffrey who has a snap percentage of 90%. Obviously, he's going to have, and he scores the most fantasy points per game out of all the running backs. He's obviously going to have one of the higher points per snap, and that's how that breaks that down. So, without further ado, these are the running backs that I'm going to be targeting in week 12, and I'll give you some of the reasons why. Try to follow along with the chart, and we'll get this put together. Number one, obviously, Christian McCaffrey, 10,500. You're never happy about 1/5 of your lineup being in one person, but this guy can totally bust a slate. I learned my lesson about midseason. I thought I was being wiser than everyone else. Faded him. It was the week that he put 51 points, or forget whatever it was. But I had some shares, but I didn't have a large share. No, I don't mass multi-entry. I don't have anything against anybody that does. If I could, I would. It makes sense. But I do build a few different lineups and play different contests, some large GPP, some head-to-head, some double up, uh, smaller cash games, um, and I spread them out like that. I might mass multi the quarter, or do a 20 entry on the $1 or something like that. But so when I say shares, that's what I'm talking. I have some share. When I didn't have many shares of him that week, I had some of him, and he was actually my number one pick. I had the number one pick, which is, I think, only happened to me 2 or 3 times in all the years I've played fantasy football for my season long. And I skipped over Barkley, which I'm really glad I did, and took McCaffrey, and pretty happy with that decision so far this year. So, and he's actually helped me be in first place in that league. So Christian McCaffrey, he's matchup proof. I mean, if you're good against the run, which New Orleans is, I look for Carolina to try to get him the ball in the passing game. It's a lot of, you hear a lot of people talk. It's like having a number one running back and a number one wide receiver all in the same one. So that kind of justifies the 10,500 for him. He's averaging 32.4 fantasy points per game. That's his average. And he had a game against Tampa Bay where they held him down pretty good, and he's still averaging that 32.4, which at 10-5, that gets, last week he scored 33 fantasy points, and what was it? 33 fantasy points, and yeah, 33.10 fantasy points, and he was the same price last week. That's getting value at 3 times. It's the ceiling on value, but it's still value. More difficult matchup this week against the Saints in New Orleans. Saints are number 4 against the running back. You look for Carolina, as I said, to get him the ball in the out of the backfield, throwing it to him. He is over 50% of their total offense, is getting 90% of the snaps. He doesn't share carries with anyone. It doesn't come out of the game. Doesn't matter if it's a blowout or if they're blowing someone out. McCaffrey will be on the field. And that's why you always have to consider him and get to him if you can. He's had 40 red zone touches, and he's averaging 0.498 fantasy points per snap. So a half a point, just about per snap that he's out there. Next up is Alvin Kamara. And what I'll say about Kamara, I'm going to say something back against McCaffrey. Kamara is going to get a lot of ownership this week because of this price, $2,300 less, a better matchup. So actually, McCaffrey's ownership might go down, and McCaffrey could actually be a contrarian pick. So that's something that you want to think about this week. But Kamara has a phenomenal matchup. Like I said, he's $8,200. He's getting 19.25 touches per game. He's averaging 18.5 fantasy points per game. Carolina is number 28 versus the running back position, and they've been getting shredded by running backs. They're giving up 28.6 fantasy points per game to the running back. Now, Kamara's snaps last four, he was out one game, so his snap percentage is low. And you do have to worry about Latavius Murray vulturing touchdowns when they get down there close. So keep that in mind. He's had 22 red zone targets, it's just average, and his average is .387 fantasy points per snap. This is phenomenal. I'm concerned with the ownership. I believe a couple things here. Thomas has a tough matchup versus Bradbury. Um, so Breeze is probably going to spread the ball around. He does anyhow, but he's probably going to spread the ball around even more to other positions. Kamara's probably going to get a bigger chunk of these, but he's going to be very popular because of that price. And other people know what this matchup is too. So I'm going to be looking at that when I build lineups. And I'm going to look at the ownership, and I might try to figure out a way to spend up to McCaffrey, as I mentioned, because he might actually be the contrarian pick. I believe these two teams will put some points on the board, and but I really like Kamara too in this matchup. Next up is Chubb. He's 8,100. He's getting 22.8 fantasy, or getting 22.8 touches per game. I'm sorry, scoring 19 fantasy points per game. Miami, they're horrible in a lot of facets of the game. They're giving up 28.7 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Number 26 DVP, which they're a little bit better than Carolina is. So if that tells you anything about Kamara, which we just talked about. He has a 69% snap percentage. He's had 38 total red zone touches. He's scoring .379 fantasy points per snap. I feel like this is going to be a Nick Chubb game. The only thing that concerns me just a little bit is Kareem Hunt. And this Kareem Hunt's two games, they pretty much just phased Chubb. He wasn't getting many passes anyhow. Now he's not getting any. And Hunt's getting already 27% snap percentage. And that factors in 4 games. He's only played 2. So I guess that's the one thing you got to think about with Chubb. He's a nice spin down option off of McCaffrey. I think Kamara and Chubb will be a lot higher owned this week. And the thing to do this year has been play all your key players against Miami. It's no different in this game. I think if Cleveland wanted to, they could probably throw the ball against Miami, but running the ball with Chubb sets up as the path of least resistance for Cleveland to win the game. So I'll definitely have some shares of Chubb in my player pool. Next is Barkley, 7,900. Last year you did not see Saquon Barkley towards the end of the season anywhere near this price. He's still getting 19.14 touches per game. And remember, he was out a little bit with the high ankle sprain. He's scoring 17.6 fantasy points per game. The Bears are giving up 27 fantasy points per game, and their DVP versus the running back is 23. And a lot of people don't know that and would probably be scared away for Barkley because of the Bears. But the Bears' defense hasn't been what it has been in the past. They're a little bit better against the passing game. But this is the kind of game he'll probably have low ownership because of the perceived matchup. And this is the kind of game that sets up really nice for Barkley. He gets 83% of the snaps, doesn't share with anybody unless he gets dinged up a little bit. He's had 23 red zone touches, which isn't super high, and averaging 0.324 fantasy points per snap. I have a lot of interest in Barkley this week just because I think he's going to be contrarian because of the perceived matchup going into Chicago, the Chicago Bear defense, and that whole mystique. But he might be real sneaky. He's definitely a nice $2,600 spin down from the top, and I'll be trying to get Barkley into some of my lineups as well. Next up is Leonard Fournette. If this guy ever falls in the end zone, he's going to have a phenomenal game. Yeah, I mean, 7,300. He's getting 22.9 touches. Excuse me, 22.9 touches per game. He's scoring an average of 17.9 fantasy points per game. Now, Tennessee's only given up 24.8 fantasy points per game to the running back um, position. They have a DVP right in the middle of 15. Well, Fournette's getting 82% of the snaps. He's matchup proof. He's out there regardless. Doesn't get a whole lot of passes out of the backfield, but this is Foles' second game back. He's had 35 total red zone touches, and this right here, this .295 per snap. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's one or I don't know that if he's had more than one rushing touchdown. But if he ever starts falling in the end zone, he's going to be. And I can look here real quick. Um, Stats. Let's see here for the season. One rushing touchdown, 854 yards rushing, and one rushing touchdown. So I believe this might be the game. Like I said, with all those touches he gets, a couple touchdowns, he would smash. And at 7,300, it's not too hard to get value if you can get a touchdown mixed in there. And this might be the week for him. This game sets up supposed to be close. The Tennessee's a 3-point home favorite, and the game totals scares you a little bit, 41.5 points. But those are the games that I usually focus on the running backs, is the games that have the closer point spreads. I really like home favorites that are small home favorites with the lower spreads. I like the running backs in those games. He's obviously the visiting running back, but I have a lot of interest in him, especially at that price. I think it's a real nice value. And this might be the week that he finally stumbles and bumbles into the end zone. Next up is Henry from the same game. He's 6,900. He's getting 20 touches per game, averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game. He's now Jacksonville's giving up 27.2 fantasy points per game to the running back position, and they have a rank of 24 DVP. He's getting 66% of the snaps. He's had 22 red zone carries, but he's got a real nice .451 points per snap, and that's because he does fall into the end zone. And I really like him and Fournette this week at those prices. It allows you to get up and spend it other areas and have a lot of interest in him at home. And these teams are above average at defending the pass, so the way to victory obviously is going to be the running game. And I look for these two running backs will probably combine for over 45 touches between them. So I talked about that early on. I like to get running backs who are getting a lot of touches. If I try to try to get a running back in the flex spot and shoot for 70 or more touches, and putting these two in your lineup would definitely get you on your way. It's just about building around them, what you can come up with. Next up, Le'Veon Bell. I got Bell. Now, yellow means I'm kind of on the fence. I haven't totally decided. Green means I'm going with them. They're in my player pool, and I will have some shares of them. Le'Veon Bell, 6,400 is getting 20.7 touches per game. He's only averaging 15.3 fantasy points per game. The Oakland's given up 25.7 fantasy points per game to their running back. They have a DVP of 19. Bell's is getting 76% of the snaps. The Jets are beat up on the offensive line. They're beat up on defense. And I believe that the Jets and Oakland are probably going to both try to move the ball through the air in this game. And this game actually, I think, sets up kind of sneaky as could be really high scoring. It's only a 45.5 point game total. But Le'Veon Bell is interesting at this price, 6,400. 20 points puts you value. It's only averaging 0.28 as far as points per snap. That's really low. It's actually third lowest on the main slate. But it'd be intriguing to have him as if you're going to stack that game, maybe stack the Oakland passing game, bring it back with some shares of Le'Veon Bell. Thought they'd be trying to get him the ball more out of the backfield. Coach speak a couple weeks ago where it was they knew it was their fault. They had lost the game. They needed to get him more involved, and it's just not happening. He's still getting 20.7 touches per game, but it needs to be 25 or more. And they need to get the ball to him out of the backfield and let him do something with it. So we'll see. I got him on the fence. I want to look at ownership and talk more about him when we did the lineup building video. Next up, Joe Mixon, 5,900. Please don't shut off the video before I say this. And this is just a hunch, but he has been more involved since Finley's become the quarterback. When they replaced Dalton with Finley, Finley has not been very good at all. But the game before last, Mixon actually touched the ball. I believe it was 31 times. He's averaging 16.8 touches per game, only scoring 11.8 fantasy points per game. Pittsburgh's very stingy versus the running game. They have the number 6 DVP versus the running back position, only giving up 19.9 fantasy points per game to the running back. Mixon's getting 60% of the snaps. He's had 24 red zone carries, got an average .301 points per snap here. And as I said, don't run away. This game, I know a lot of people are heavy on Pittsburgh. This game kind of concerns me. I am by far I live in Ohio. I'm not a Bengals fan. As I mentioned, I'm a Cowboys fan. Teams that are 0-10 are dangerous. And when they're playing a division game at home, this is their Super Bowl. And I just have a feeling that it's not going to, if they do good, it's not going to be so much on the back of Finley, but it would be if they got Mixon going, and I just wouldn't be surprised. It's just a hunch that I have, and I will have some shares of him. Not as high as the ones in green, obviously, but just an interesting play. After Mixon is Kareem Hunt. He's 5,600. I don't really like running back committees. This would be I probably wouldn't use Chubb and Hunt in the same lineup, but if I was trying to save salary, the only thing I don't like is 5,600 for his role right now. But he is getting a large share of snaps. It says 27%. Remember, that's based on 4 games, and he's only played 2. But he is getting all the passes out of the backfield. That's who they're going. I mean, they're bringing him in, and he's getting a ton of. He's already averaging 11.5 touches per game in 2 games. Scored 13.1 fantasy points per game. Miami, obviously, we talked about this with Chubb. They're 26 DVP versus the running back, and they give up 28.7 fantasy points per game to the running back position. He's only had 1 red zone carry, and Chubb does get those. He's, as I mentioned, he's getting 27% of the snaps and 0.34 points per snap. He's really interesting, and I wouldn't mind having some shares of him if I didn't have Chubb. maybe in my flex spot, take a flyer on him. He is the kind of guy that can bust an 80-yard run on you, and um, put together some fantasy points pretty quick. And he was putting them together pretty quick last week. They were in the Pittsburgh game. They were targeting him a ton out of the backfield. So keep your eye on him. I have him in yellow, and that's just I'll have some shares, just not as high as the ones in green. Next up is Montgomery. He's 5,500 for Chicago. It's really interesting. Giants are giving up 25.3 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Number 17 DVP. He's getting 63% of the snaps. He's at 20 red zone carries. Has a .312 points per snap. 5,500, and he's the main ball carrier for Chicago. They do bring Cohen in. Cohen gets a 42% snap share, so it's a 60-40 split, and I generally don't like the committees, but this is a really interesting game versus the Giants that I think they might try to lean on Montgomery, even though they do have a phenomenal matchup with Robinson. But I see them maybe trying to control this game old-fashioned Chicago's running game and trying to shut down the Giants' rushing game. I already mentioned Barkley in the same game. And the Bears, their run defense is the worst compared to their defense, but I think Montgomery will go overlooked and obviously be lower owned, and at that price, he's very intriguing. It doesn't take much to get value at 5,500. Next is James White. I got him in yellow. Notice I don't have Ezekiel Elliott, and I am a Cowboys fan, but I don't have any problem being unbiased when it comes to the bank account. James White, 5,300. He's another one. If he can ever fall into the end zone, he'll be smashing too. Now he only has a 46% snap share. He's only getting 9.44 touches per game, scoring 12.9 fantasy points per game. Like I said, though, he doesn't. His touchdowns are. Let's look here. I'm not sure how many touchdowns he's had. James White. Let's see stats. He's another one with one touchdown, and he's got 134 yards rushing, and of course several yards receiving. I think Dallas will. It'll be difficult for Brady to throw the ball. They're going to come out. I think Brady is going to try to come out and throw the ball, and if with their running game might be throwing the ball to White out of the backfield. As I mentioned, he hasn't really smashed as far as fantasy points because he's not scoring the touchdowns. But he does average, if you look here, .411 points per snap, and he's getting 46% of the snaps. Michelle is the bell cow running back, so to speak, on this team. But you never know with New England. I mean, they could start Bolden on Sunday, but I just feel like Brady is going to be coming out throwing the ball on the Cowboys, and I believe that James White's going to be a big part of this game plan because the Cowboys do have a problem stopping running backs, especially ones that are getting targeted out of the backfield. So after White is this guy down here, Geis. He's 4,700. He's averaging 10.5 touches per game. He's only played 2 games, last week in the first game. He's averaging 10.4 fantasy points per game. And Detroit is number 31 DVP versus the running back position. They're giving up 32.6 fantasy points per game to the running back. And I believe Washington would like to do nothing else than take the burden off of Dwayne Haskins. And this would be a good way to do it. There was a questionable tag for Adrian Peterson yesterday, but I believe he practiced, and coach said that he believed that Peterson would be making a go. But I look for the touches to start going towards Geis. He had a really good catch and run last week in that game, and he's averaging .47 fantasy points per snap. So he's off to a real good start. Uh, 4 total red zone carries in 2 games, and of course the snap percentage is low. That just because this is based on the last 4, and he's only played one of those 4, and so his snap percentage is low. It's only 10, but he's one to definitely watch out for. And always check the injury report anyhow on Sundays at 11:30 and at 3 o'clock. But if for some reason Peterson would be out, this I think would be the free spot of the week if Peterson would be out for any reason. So keep an eye on that. I have a lot of interest in him, but a lot of it depends on Peterson. I'm not real excited about running back committees. This week, I really like the value at running back, and I'm very confident in these 11 that I have identified. So summing up the running backs I will be targeting in Week 12 are as follows. Christian McCaffrey, follow along right over here. Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, and Henry from Tennessee. Those are the ones in green, and Darius Geis is in green. Those are definitely in my player pool. These ones in yellow are in my player pool, but I have tempered my expectations. I'll have lower ownership of them. Le'Veon Bell from the Jets, Joe Mixon from Cincinnati, Kareem Hunt from Cleveland, Montgomery from the Bears, and James White from New England. And as I mentioned, tomorrow when I do the lineup building video, I'll factor in the ownership numbers and may add or subtract. I don't do much of that on the lineup building. If there's something to do with injuries or something like that, I might do that. But I'm pretty set on these, and I like this group of running backs that I've identified. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I hope this information is some value to you. As I mentioned, I encourage you to screenshot this, pause the video, use it however you like, and hope it helps you put together some good lineups this weekend. And thanks again for your time. I encourage you to please post any opinions or comments below, something you want to see me add to this, something you think might help out even more, something like you'd like to see. I'll see if I can put it together. I'm working on making this stuff better each and every week. My subscription numbers are trending upwards slowly, but they're trending upwards, and my views, and I really appreciate that. It helps me out a lot if you guys will share this video, like it, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts. It really helps me out a lot. I will be back shortly to post the wide receiver video. Then tomorrow I'll be doing tight end, defense, special teams, and following that up with the lineup building video, and where I built some manuals, some optimized lineups with my optimizer. Put a nice big pretty bow on it and put it under the tree for Sunday and do some winning. Again, thanks for joining me. I'll be back shortly. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports. Have a good evening.